Digital Marketing Specialist Program was designed by local and international industry practitioners with the aim to equip all participants with strategic, tactical and technical knowledge to immediately upskill them with the skill sets, employability and increase the demand for their services in the digital economy. The program provides a solid understanding of digital marketing ecosystem in the real world. It offers experiential learning. Participants can build capabilities and skill set to offer their services not only locally but also internationally.
So this could be a kind of advisory service that you could offer as a marketing specialist. So obviously you need to listen. You listen as in listen to social media, engage in that conversation and measure and refine that conversation.
In terms of marketing objective, this will actually support the overall business objective by promoting the brand image and presence across the markets in Asia Pacific.
In terms of the facilitators, all facilitators are industry practitioners with years of experience and facilitators who are able actually to impart the practical knowledge so that participants are able to apply whatever learned in the real life.
I'm Magat. I'm a chartered accountant by practice. So when I got to know about this program, I was interested because I always get to see this scrolling on Facebook seeing this digital marketing. So I wanted to know what is this about. And then apparently we had this session with MIM. The session was very mind-blowing to me personally, being an accountant that doesn't know about this before. And actually it's very practical to our real-life situation in which what is happening behind the scene that we don't know, but we scroll through every day through our social media. So if you ask me now, can I do a digital marketing service? I'd say definitely 100%. I know what to do, where to click, who to market to, what is our potential prospecting kind of thing. So for an accountant to be able to say that, I would say that this program is successful and kudos to the organizers.
I attend this MIM courses. I think it's very beneficiary. Can put all these things into our practical. I'm doing property, so this course helped me a lot so that I can do my advertisement more effectively.
I believe that I have learned a lot from this course. Speaking of the participants, I feel like everybody has been really helpful, and whoever has extra knowledge or of this digital marketing, they were very open and willing to share their knowledge. It's the beginning for me.
I would say this course is very useful and insightful for a beginner like me. I'm totally new to digital marketing. The instructor gave me a better picture of this digital marketing world.
In fact, very productive and very immersive and very hands-on. I must really give credit to MIM for doing such overall training, because to me it's a lifelong training. It doesn't end here. In short, I learned a lot. In fact, a lot more than I expected.
Thank you, HRDF.
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 Thank you, MIM.
Thank you, MIM.
Thank you, MIM. Insightful.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Mind-blowing.
Good afternoon and a warm welcome as always from the Malaysian Institute of Management. I would like to thank everyone who has taken the time to be here at our second webinar on MIM Crucial Conversations for this week. The topic that we're going to be actually covering today is reimagining women in leadership, being a driving force for transformation and sustainable development. Let me start off by thanking our sponsors, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and our supporting partners, the Federation of Public Listed Companies, as well as the Malaysian Insurance Institute for their continued support to us. I'd like to thank our speakers, Shweta Kumar and Florence Tan, for coming on board to share their expertise and experiences in this topic. Just before we dive into the, listening into the speakers, I'd like to set the scene a little bit. We do know there have been a humongous amount of surveys and, studies done during the pandemic that women have been really hit hard by just what the impact has been of COVID-19, whether it's burnouts, whether it's dropping off the workforce because they've not been able to balance between the personal requirements as well as work. It's just been a huge challenge for women. But having said that, we also see women have actually contributed to the workforce in many ways in a with very positive outcomes. I would like to go ahead and share a little bit of statistics with you all, but this is in no way to show one gender is better than the other. But what it really is going to show is that diversity is an important element in organizational structures, and we need to be very receptive about it. So first and foremost, McKinsey actually ran a survey on 423 companies across the US and Canada, and some quite startling, statistics that have come out. So women, so this is women versus how men actually perform. Providing emotional support to employees. 19% of men actually show that they are able to provide emotional support as opposed to women who are 31%. Checking in on the well-being of employees, 54% as compared to 61%. Helping employees navigate work-life challenges, 24% of men compared with 29% of women. There's more. Taking action to prevent or manage employee burnout, 16% compared to women being 21%. Women also spend more time contributing to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So 7% of men compared to 11% of women. Hence today's session, and we are going to actually deep dive in many of these areas today. I'm going to not hold on to giving you too much of a background, but I'm going to start introducing you to our first speaker, Shweta Kumar. She's the Chief Skilling Architect for Disperse. She's also a founder of her own company, Invincible Woman. She's got 20 years of experience working with various clients with various geographies, India, Africa, Middle East, Latin America, and so forth. She's also worked with huge companies such as Honeywell, Motorola, Intel, Naspers. And in this specific area, women in leadership, she has done a huge amount of research on this topic, and she specializes in women in leadership development. She has authored multiple research and theses in this area, one being iridescent. And I'm not going to hold the virtual stage anymore. I'm going to call on Shweta Kumar and pass it over to her. She's a familiar and a much familiar face in the MIM faculty pool. And over to you, Shweta.
Thank you so much, Suganti, and a very warm welcome to all of the participants, to all of you who are listening in. And before I start the presentation, I just thought, let me just put where we are today. Let's just bring everybody, just remind everybody where we are, right? So, as Suganti talked about, there is, you heard the statistics, and there has been a I would say we are also standing at a very incredible point of time in history, because there's now before COVID and after COVID, right? It is such a distinctive marker in history. And a year, I would say, actually exactly almost 2 years since the first breakout. we know that women have made some very important gains in representation, and you will actually see the data and trends that I'm going to share with you, especially in senior leadership. But we also know that the pandemic continues to take a toll. We now know that women are significantly more burnt out and far more increasingly more so than men. So everything that we talk about today, we must also take into, the pandemic has kind of added a lens before. And despite this added stress and exhaustion, what are we seeing? We're seeing that women are rising to the moment as stronger leaders, doing extra work. Women are, like Sugandhi shared, supporting teams, advancing diversity, equity, inclusion efforts. And yet, somewhere along the lines, and of course, organizations are benefiting from it, and leaders are loving this and benefiting from it. The worry that we have is that this work is going unrecognized, unrewarded, undernourished, and so the problem is that the work, at the very moment where you most need these leaders, are the likelihood that you're going to companies might lose these leaders. And it's really hard to imagine organizations navigating this post pandemic world and building inclusive workplaces if this work is not prioritized. So I just wanted to kind of keep that, put that out there, and we can get started with the presentation. If I could just have the slides up. Thank you. And we can just look at, I have been tasked with with the very important task of talking about women leaders and entrepreneurs, where we stand, where we are headed, and some global trends in that. And you will actually see some very distinct trends in what is happening to women in organizations and entrepreneurs. And it's some very interesting things that are coming out. And the question for us as people in human resources, in businesses, in L&D is, what does that mean? What do we need to do differently, right? Let's look at the drivers for economy. Yeah, and I call it economy because women are not just increasing in workforce, they're also increasing in purchasing power. There are more and more women who are making purchasing power decisions, not just on what happens with the months or the day's income, but also where the property investment is going to be made, where are the retirement benefits going to be made. So it is, in that sense, it's a economy because more and more women are actually becoming buyers and not just contributors to the economy. So let's look at some broad drivers. I'd already talked about COVID, right? COVID not just brought remote working to the fore, it exposed some very, I would say, important chinks or weaknesses in our supply chain, right? Our dependencies were really exposed. It was like our soft underbelly of the manufacturing sector really showed up. The mid-market emerged as very, very important, which is like the beating heart, right, of many sectors. So that and that really became a big driver for what I'm going to talk about. The second is social movements, right? We saw Black Lives Matter, we saw immigrant movements, we saw gender equality movements, from South Asia all the way to US, to Latin America, to Africa. Social movements have started gaining in traction, which means that you're going to start literally seeing a rainbow colored workforce. And it would be unwise to not be able to tap into the talent because that talent is available, right? Technology came in and did something very interesting. Technology democratized learning, right? So I'll give you a very simple example. There was a course that I was looking at for a while, which was very, very expensive, and it was it was a Harvard online course. And I was looking at it for a while, and I was like, okay, I can't afford this, so I'm going to wait. And something very interesting happened. A few months later, I saw that course. It had become a similar course had become first a paid course on Udemy. Then it became a free course. If you go to Khan Academy, it's literally free learning. And so what it means is that learning is no longer a person's or a gender or a class. Learning is no longer restricted to a class. From curious children in Africa, to fiercely ambitious mothers in Latin America, to very smart, ambitious, focused women in Malaysia, to men, women, children, everybody is learning. You just need a laptop or a phone and internet and a lot of curiosity and ambition. The environmental crisis that has come to the fore, and this is especially true in communities because I'm going to be talking to you about entrepreneurship. And we see a lot of entrepreneurship happening in pockets where there is where they are already facing the brunt of water shortage, land going away, forests, climate change, right? And so the communities that are living at the transition points, we saw last year what happened with the forests in New Zealand. We know what is happening in Brazil, and let us not kid ourselves, right? We're not in a bubble, right? It's already happening. All of us are experiencing it, and so all of this are the background against which we need to be looking at what is happening in the world of women, right? Let's go and look at some key trends. Now, let me start by talking about the tipping point, right? All of you know about the 30% tipping point at the global level. This is the level that the milestone that has been predicted, that if you have 30% women at a global level of workforce and leadership, then it will catalyze greater gender diversity, meaning these 30% women will now seed greater inclusion. And just the fact that these women are there will encourage other women. And again, like Sugandhi talked about, right? Gender is just one fault line. There are multiple fault lines that we work across, some of which we are not even conscious of. But it will encourage a huge amount of inclusion. So today, actually, you see globally, if you look at 31% of senior leadership roles are being held by women leaders, right? The proportion of senior management roles being held by women over the past 5 years has actually increased. So from 25% in early 2017, we actually see a 31% rise. 90% businesses have at least one woman in senior management roles. And I know it's not visible, but this is actually data that we are seeing from McKinsey and from a lot of published data. Let's now look at this in a little bit more. Let's slice and dice this data a little bit more, right? I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about entrepreneurs. And this is very, very interesting. The growing rate of women-owned businesses is 5%, right? So every year, the percentage of women-owned businesses is increasing by 5%. Women-owned businesses are generating $1.9 trillion in revenue. Now, that is no small amount. $1.9 trillion is a huge, huge economy. Interesting facts you see when you look at data coming in from countries like Ghana, Uganda, Vietnam. More than 46% of private businesses in Ghana are women-owned. Uganda and Vietnam are home to over 30% of women-owned companies, right? Globally, it's a 36% wide. And in the US, women are launching more than 1,200 new businesses every single day. Now, what does this mean? If you look at the first two slides, there is a cause for much optimism, much celebration, isn't it? Because the percentage of women in senior leadership is growing. It looks like women entrepreneurs are not only contributing, but they're also kind of creating new businesses and successful new businesses, because they're generating a lot of revenue. And you can imagine they're hiring and giving employment to a lot of people. However, we do see that time is moving differently in different places, right? While 83% of countries have recorded a proportion of women leaders over the 30% tipping point, things are not exactly the same in different parts of the world. So you see in 36%, 33% of women, at senior leadership team happening in places like Europe, US, Latin America, 39% in Africa. And I'll talk about that very interesting trend. Why is that? And that happens because a lot of women, girls, bright, promising girls in Africa have started taking advantage of scholarships, which then enable them to go to really good universities, which then they go to, and then they come back and they kind of take on leadership roles, right? So that's something that's really helping them. But if you look at ASEAN and APAC, especially APAC, ASEAN is still good. We're still at 28%. And please remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is across the board line. It is not the same in all levels of the organization. And before we continue, I think it's a great segue for us now to look at and do a bit of reflection on what is happening in your own organization. So a poll is going to come up. You're going to see a poll coming up right now. Please share a poll. and you're going to have to answer 3 short questions. And once you've answered those questions, you'll see the data at the end of the session. Sugandhi, let me know whenever the poll is, once the participants are done.
You can go ahead, Shweta. The poll is going to be running in the background. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So do answer the questions because I'm very curious to know. All of us are very curious to know what is going to come out of this cohort, and you will get to see the data as well, right? All right. So what did we see so far? We saw that organizations are in the world. There are some. We are literally on the brink of a lot of things. Like there's almost like a tsunami of events are coming together, and the economy is exploding, and it looks like things are really going great. And so, should we really be worrying? Is this topic really worth talking about? And I'm going to share a little bit about that in the next few slides. Now, if you see in the world of businesses, there is a mixed trend, right? Women are getting lesser loans than men, but the crowdfunding and overall investor trust seems to be higher for women. And there is a reason for this, right? There's data-backed evidence to show that women basically take, they tend to mitigate risks better. Now, again, like Sugandhi talked about, please remember this is really very broad generalizations that we are doing here when we just look at data. The fact of the matter is both men and women are equally good at taking risks, managing risks, and we know that. But in general, we see that ironically, and it's almost like a paradox, men tend to receive higher loan sizes. Women receive slightly lesser investment, but the overall trust seems to be very high with women, especially if you look at crowdfunding. Interestingly, female entrepreneurship statistics also indicate that women who do seek funding successful only in 31% of the cases, which means that for every 10 women who go out and look for funding, only 3 women get funding. If you look at very large and traditional, and I would say high employment generating industries like construction, high-tech manufacturing, metal industries, only 13% of that are being led by women. And please know the reason why I'm picking this up is because these are economies that are like the backbone of the community or the country, right? Construction, infrastructure building, etc. 10% of healthcare startups are owned and founded by women. Again, interesting statistic there because healthcare has been one of the fields where we see a lot of women are kind of, medicine, doctors, research, scientists, these kind of professions see a lot of women. And yet the transition to entrepreneurship doesn't seem to be happening enough, right? So let's look at a little bit more why and what can we do. So what's working? Let's look at what's working in this world, right? There are certain, and I'm sorry, you can't see a lot of that. Yes, you can probably see this better now, but there are actions that are being taken to promote gender balance. So if you see the graph on the right hand side, in 2021, in the year 2021, much more companies actually did active things and policies to make sure that their women were actually able to continue to work, access developmental work opportunities, and it has gone up significantly. So if you look at things like creating an inclusive culture, then from 2019 to 2021, you see somewhere like 5 percentage increase points. And, mentoring, for example, has gone up significantly. 8 percentage shift up. So 24% of companies were actually doing mentoring and coaching for their women, and now 32% of women are doing this for their women. Same thing with flexible working, actually setting targets for gender balanced, inclusion and leadership pipelines, having a mentor program, offering, unconscious bias training, and so on and so forth, right? So there's a lot of work that is happening. And there's a lot of optimism. So if you look at the data on the left, 69% are actually expecting that these new working practices in their organizations will benefit the trajectories of the women's careers in the long term. Now let's look at, I'm just going to look at what's not working. Right, so I'm just going to move to the next slide. Just give me a minute. Sorry. Now, again, we have data. There are certain things that are still not working out. So for every 100 men who are promoted, 86 women are being promoted at the very first rung. So women lose the most ground at the very first step to manager. What does this mean? It means that we are probably hiring, and certainly in the US and Europe, this has been happening for at least the last quarter of a century, meaning 25 years, women and men are being hired at the same rate at a very entry level. But if it kind of dies down, if you look at APAC, countries like India, Malaysia, Singapore, China, statistics are slightly different in China, but at all of these countries, you see that for the moment the first level, from the first level to the second level comes in, then you already start seeing these biases creep up. Right? So that's the first level of data. The share of employees who are consistently burnt out. 42% of women are saying that they have been often or almost always burnt out in 2021 compared to 32% a year ago. So now if you contrast that with the slide that I showed you a while back, just the previous slide, while the efforts have increased, women are burning out more and more. And the worst thing is women in leadership are more likely to face certain microaggressions. Now, I'm sure all of you already know this, but I'm just going to. Microaggression is essentially a form of aggression which is crouched. It's not a direct aggression, right? It's a crouched offensive statement. It could be something enough to make you feel uncomfortable and not very happy, but not enough for you to be able to point out and confront the other person. And women in leadership face a lot of that. In fact, Sugandhi talked about the research that I've done. There's a whole bit of work that is happening with psychological violence that's happening, right? And so that is clearly not working. And all the efforts that we are doing, it looks like more work needs to be done. What is happening here? Let's look at, I'm just going to move to the next slide. Let's look at some of the challenges that are continuing to be faced by women leaders. And this is something that I can tell you from the research that I have done, the publication that I've done, and the work that I do, that we all do at Invincible Women, is that women leaders, in fact, now are facing more of these challenges. It's because today, the barriers to women developing in the organization is no longer coming from a policy level. No company in the world, I think, will have a policy that says, I'm not going to promote women. It is coming from very, very deep, unconscious biases that are accumulating. So what happens is, eventually, the behaviors that are associated with a leader become more acceptable in a male. And so invariably, at a certain level and above, women themselves stop seeing themselves as leaders. They themselves start, and you see this whole thing called as imposter syndrome, not knowing, if I behave in a very aggressive manner, then I'm not being woman enough. But if I behave in a very nurturing manner, I'm not being leader enough. So where do I stand? And that's the first challenge, which I talked about, stereotype threat. This is actually a cognitive challenge that women face. When you are in a room full of men, or when you're a minority, immediately your brain starts sensing a lack of psychological safety. The role gender paradox that I talked about, right? Being held to dual and often contradictory standards. What a leader should look like and behave versus what a woman should, what a leader and what a woman should look like and behave. I'll give you a very interesting anecdote. I'm in the midst of writing a book, and I'm interviewing very senior women leaders all over the world. And I'm interviewing women who have actually made it to boards. So they are directors on boards of several companies. I'm talking to women from Singapore, from women in Europe, a couple of them in US, and of course many of them in India. And this is what a very interesting exercise she said. This lady that I'm talking about, she told me that they did in their company. They wrote down profiles of people, Yeah. And they described, so it is like, for example, I'm Shweta, so it described Shweta. Shweta is XYZ, Shweta behaves like this, Shweta is decisive, blah, blah, blah. And, Shweta, and they gave some case studies with Shweta. And exactly the same persona with a little bit of changes, the gender was changed, right? So it was called, let's say, not Shweta, but maybe Harish. Yeah. And these profiles were shared with leaders who were selecting board members. And she said, we did this very interesting exercise because we wanted to show the level of bias. And it's very deep and it's very unconscious, so it's difficult to kind of confront. But what they did is the same person got selected if it was a Harish, he did not get selected if it was a Shweta, which means that it just intrinsically feels wrong if a woman is behaving in a way. First problem, and incidentally, that is what I do with women leaders. The worst problem is analyze this. And which is why what happens is if you see at the middle level of women, at the mid level usually is where it starts, the leadership pipeline starts thinning out. And this is where you will see a maximum number of women leaving. And a lot of companies like to believe that women are leaving because they're taking care of their families. But we know that women continue to have careers after they've had children. In fact, at a mid level, the kids have actually grown up, right? And actually is a time for them to really go out there and get big roles. What happens? And what happens is basically this: women internalize the bias and actually don't see themselves as leaders. So that is something that really that we see a lot. There's a huge amount of loneliness and lack of role models. There's one more company, I can share one more anecdote with you. This lady is a very senior lady at Unilever. And she said that in my entire career, I was trying to emulate male leaders, right? And some of my male bosses or managers, they were very, 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 sort of aggressive in their behavior. She comes from a function which is sales, which is also as a function a very, very sort of very direct, very goal oriented. And so she said, suddenly in my middle manager, when I reached a mid manager and I was up for promotion, I got the feedback that, you are incredibly aggressive. And she said, I know that I'm incredibly aggressive, but I didn't know any better. I thought that there is only one template of leadership. And that is the other big challenge that we have. And this is not just for women, right? If you look at, I talked about earlier, we have multiple fault lines. If you look at anybody who's a minority and is not able to see more of themselves, it's very difficult for them to imagine what it might look like to be a leader. And I refer to the very famous saying, what you can't see, you can't become. So if you don't see enough role models, you just don't know how will you become that person. And the last one, and I know some of you have answered a poll question around this: lack of mentors and sponsors. Even at the topmost levels, we see women struggling to find sponsors and mentors. I have spoken to very senior women leaders across the globe, and most companies actually have a program to help their top leadership to get to board level roles. And almost invariably, we find that either the women have not been assigned a mentor. Even if the mentor has been assigned, the woman has, many of the participants said it's not working for me, or the mentors have said, I don't know what's happening, but I'm not able to kind of build a relationship. And so what happens is that there is a struggle despite the intent of companies. It's not that companies are not doing it. Despite the intent of companies, women are not able to make the most of it. And of course, it's both, right? It's some companies don't have a program, and this is actually undoing a lot of the work that we talked about at the beginning, right? So there's a lot of good work that has happened. And now let me draw you back to the thing that I talked at the beginning of our presentation, right? Post-pandemic, many things are changing. You saw, I'm sure you have seen data, 4 million people in the US have given up their jobs. And this happens after every large humanitarian crisis. We saw after there was a fix in the 1700s and 1800s, after a large disease and a pandemic that had happened, we saw the Renaissance movement. We saw the Industrial Revolution coming in right after the Spanish flu. So after a large humanitarian crisis, generally what happens is people, as a collective, in our collective conscious, there's a huge need to kind of get connected to your purpose, to become very creative, and you need a lot of innovation happens, right? In fact, I was listening to an economics podcast that says post pandemic, you're going to see 5 years worth of innovation is going to happen in the next 18 months. So what do you need for innovation? You need an inclusive leadership. And what is happening in the pandemic? Women are getting burnt out and they are actually leaving. So like I said, the time when you need your women leaders the most are the chances are the women are struggling the most, right? I'm going to move on. Give me a minute. So we have come a very long way. If you see some of the earlier slides, 2018, 2019, and those of you who are from my vintage, I would not like to age or date myself, but I mean, I remember a few years back, even maternity benefit laws, having daycare and creches, even the structural things, like things that are on top of the surface, right? Above the surface, things that an organization could do to help women to come to the workplace and stay in the workplace, that was a struggle. But we have now completed that. I think that part of the work has been done in the most part, if not completely done. But the work on what lies beneath, the fact that leadership is not only in one color, leadership does not only comes in one color, that women can actually be themselves, very authentic to who they really are, and still be very successful leaders. This idea is still not completely ingrained in organizations. And when you close your eyes, and I am requesting you to do that, if you close your eyes and you think of the chairman of a company, I think you're still thinking of a man in a suit. Or if you're thinking as the president of a country, you're probably still thinking of a man in a suit. Until we are able to, and the problem is even women are imagining a man in a suit, right? Until we are able to make this transition, we still have a lot of work to be done. I'm just going to end my conversation here. Just give me a minute. Suganti, I would like to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Shweta. That was really interesting statistics. When I watched you present and see that we have tipped over the 30%, we have great interventions being put in place, but still, falling short in funding, in promotions, in being burnt out. That's just a long way to go. And what you left us with women being themselves and still being leaders, I think it's an absolutely critical, piece of information. And I'm sure we will talk about it when we get into the panel session. Let me now introduce Florence Tan, who's our next speaker. She is part of PwC. She actually, in her capacity as the Corporate Responsibility, Inclusion and Diversity, as well as Well-being Lead in PwC, she develops and runs programs for PwC, the community and environment that are sustainable in the long term. When I actually saw Florence's title, all it brought to me was, just how much of emphasis PwC has put in this space as an agenda. PwC itself as an organization has won many awards, ACCA Malaysian Sustainability Reporting Award. They've got Life at Work Award in 2017. They've also won the British Malaysia Chamber of Commerce Excellence Award in 2019. However, I do want to go back to Florence's credentials. She has actually been with PwC for 18 years, has worked to cultivate employee engagement and work through my role with her role. And her topic for today is creating a culture of inclusion. Florence, I'm going to hand it over to you. Please take us through your presentation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope that everyone has got a good lunch or a good meal wherever you may be, and you're all ready to take all of this on. So thank you for the very kind introduction, Suganti. And I must say, it is a tough call to follow an amazing presentation by Shweta just now. So I will try my best to kind of share our learning and our experiences doing inclusion and diversity at PwC. So before I start, I'd just like to say that I'm very honored to be invited by MIM to share here today. And I feel like I have somewhat come full circle. You see, I've attended MIM's Triala program in my first few years at PwC. And it's always great to return to PwC and to share ideas and our experience. Right, just give me a moment. I shall now attempt to switch slides using a online clicker. Let's try this. Well, it takes its time to switch. Yeah, there it goes. So what we'll be sharing today, there are three key topics. So what I'll cover is what does inclusion and diversity means at PwC, what our journey have been, and a few key best practices. So during Shweta's presentation just now, she has shared a lot of data, trends, and ideas. So what I'll do is, so that you gain the maximum benefit out of this session, is to kind of share what all this means and how PwC have practiced and implemented those ideas and concepts. So let me just move on. Okay, so you see here a diagram, and you'll see from PwC slides, we usually have a lot of diagrams. So I just like to call your attention to this word here called diversity. We know it's a noun. It means a range of different things. While inclusion is a word, it requires us to do something, and to be inclusive, we have to act. Inclusion is not the same as diversity because it's an action that mitigates biases. So inclusive behaviors results in other people feeling valued, respected, supported, and there is a sense of belonging at the end of the day. So inclusion is what we do as a firm, as a culture, right? And so just to kind of set the scene for inclusion and diversity, and also for us, diversity is more than just gender. There are a couple of things that we look at as well, and you see that there's 36 different dimensions, or even more, and some of them visible, some of them not visible. Okay, so the next slide shows the common inclusion and diversity parameters there. The common one, and especially in Malaysia, it's race or ethnicity. Second one is gender, and the third might be physical abilities. And what doesn't come up very often in discussions, there is age, there's educational background, what you study, there's the people, everyone at work, do they all have the same educational backgrounds? Do they come from the same schools, for instance? There's also socio-economic status. For instance, if you look at your friends and your family, of course, families you can't choose, right? But look at your friends and your colleagues. Do they all come from the same socio-economic bubble, for instance? Right? So you can kind of take a step back and then kind of think about who are your common your friends. Do they fall in a common bracket, for instance? Do they all have the same likes or hobbies or activities that you do? And lastly, personality. And it's more about the way how you work, the way you think. There are dimensions of diversity in those two. Sorry, my phone just kind of, I need to reactivate it all the time. Okay, so when we also talk about diversity and inclusion, or inclusion and diversity, there's also now DEI, this new thing that people talk about, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what does equity mean? So it looks at how do you create a level playing field, or a process to ensure that all the hiring decisions or the promotion processes and the programs that you have at work are impartial and fair, and it is there is fair outcomes for every individual. Now, this is a tough call because it looks to remove systemic barriers which will cause this inequality in the first place. Right? It can take years, but in the short term, our focus should be on respect and respecting people as they are and giving them opportunities in a fair manner. So this is just to kind of set the scene. The key takeaways here, the ideas are around the many elements of or dimensions of diversity, how you are going to be inclusive, and this new idea about equity. So next is a PwC inclusion and diversity journey. Right. So we started with, not with gender, actually, we started with this in 2009. There was this whole discussion around Gen X, Gen Y, and baby boomers. And because at PwC, 70% of our people are Gen Y, and there was this whole discussion about how everyone's different and how do you cater to the different groups and the needs of these different groups, right? And then 3 years on, we move on to gender, and here we talk about opportunities for women at work. But there is, just to share with you guys, we were challenged by our own people, and they have asked, like, why the focus on women? Why all this talk about women? Because as you can see, 62% of PwC Malaysia are women. And so all the men was going, if you look around, there's all just women. What about us men? So then 3 years on again, we began to have broader based programs that look at valuing differences. So for instance, all the different elements of diversity, to look at that and how do we be inclusive of everyone at work. So although we start with 62%, actually 60 over percent, even at graduate level, we start at 60%. But that it is evident that there is a leaking pipeline. Shweta mentioned just now that out of 100 men, only 86 women are promoted. So it is the same. And we are trying to see how we can help retain women at work. And also I will talk to having targets as well in the next slide or so. Oh, no, actually in the next slide. Okay, wait, let me switch to the next slide. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so here's a couple of examples around how we incorporate I&D at work. So I mentioned gender targets just now. So across the PwC network, we have a program or initiative to look at gender targets in the next 1 year, 4 years, and then the next 8 years. So each PwC territory has been asked to do that, and we are in the midst of doing so. And trying, and alongside these targets, we're trying to see also how do we kind of ensure that there is no leaking pipeline. There's also mentorship and sponsorship. Again, this is not just for women, but across the firm. People are encouraged to speak to leaders whom they look up to and to get leadership more of like direction, and also sponsorship in terms of looking at opportunities, not just in PwC Malaysia, but also in the network. There is gender talks. I'd just like to expand a little bit on this. In the past, when we organize International International Women's Day or any other diversity talk, most of them, when you come to a room, they're all women. I'm not sure if you also have this. situation in your company. But over the years, we've been trying to have, when we look at valuing differences, to have more men join the conversation around diversity, and trying to move it away from just talking about women. And because, we want to look at equal opportunities for everyone. Yeah, of course, you have Women's Week. And there is also progressive policies for maternity and paternity leave. A few years ago, PwC Malaysia, it was a journey to look at paternity leave, for instance. It used to be 2 days, then it moved to 5 days, and now it is 30 days. And this is to kind of encourage or put out the message that around the stereotype of having just women hold the helm, or take the 100% of responsibility of childcare. Because fathers, they have a role as well. And as when we kind of like look at the topic of paternity leave, there are a few jokes to say that I will not say whether it came from PwC or not, or whether it's an external one, but there were a few comments around like, oh, so now I have to think about how I'm going to utilize the extra days. Shall I go play golf? Right? So it is trying to move that needle, that conversation, that even that thinking around paternity leave is just going to register your child birth certificate, for instance. There is an active role to play. So perhaps one day maybe we can aspire to just have paternity leave, and not just a maternity leave and a differentiation. So at PwC, we also have people with disabilities. So we have 6 differently abled colleagues who are not just at some firm services. We also have people who are external client facing. And of these 6, there are 2 who uses a wheelchair, who are external client facing. We also look at accessibility at the office because of a few of our colleagues who are wheelchair bound, and also who's seeing impaired, vision impaired. And then we have got support and awareness. So one diversity week, we had someone from the National Council of the Blind come over to kind of share about vision impaired and how do they work, how do they to kind of like navigate home and life, because we have a few who are visually impaired at the office, and it was nice to kind of step into their shoes and understand the challenges which they face. And then we've got like for parents, I mentioned that the leaking pipeline, and some women who may want to leave after they start a family. So we have got a parents network at PwC, which we have been running for some time now. And what this is about is to kind of like enable parents, and not just mothers. So we very intentionally use parents because it encompasses both mothers and fathers. And we have intentionally also invited fathers to kind of share their experience of fatherhood. And we notice that with the younger dads, they are more hands-on. They are not afraid to kind of share their experiences, and also include and ask for other young fathers like themselves to kind of like share. So the benefits of this is that Shweta just now spoke about role models. The importance of seeing another leader whom you can relate to, someone who is like yourself, right? So the Parents Network enables parents to see other parents who is not just surviving at work, but also thriving at work. To kind of like see, oh, how can I get there one day? And it's so comforting to know that you're not alone, that there are other people who are also in the same boat as you are. And it is very powerful to know that. And it helps in helping people stay in the firm. So we also have got a Plan B childcare, and this was pre-pandemic, of course, but still worthwhile to kind of share the idea. So how this came about is that where parents would have like their go-to childcare provider or a kindergarten that their kids go to. Sometimes they might close, or they might not be able to send their kids there. We worked out an arrangement with a couple of childcare uh, childcare providers in our area near our office to kind of like be able to have the arrangement where our parents, if they need emergency childcare, they can have their child there um, in just one day. You don't need like pre-registration and all that, and you can kind of claim that from the firm, the cost of that from the firm. So that's just to kind of help people out, not a mad scramble of trying to find someone to care for your child during an emergency. We've also got flex benefits, and these benefits, I just wanted to kind of emphasize that it's not just for the parents that can kind of like benefit from it. Benefits everyone in the firm. So we have got this thing called Flex Fridays, where the second Friday of the month you can go off at 12 p.m. to kind of run errands, go to the bank, go and do your child's vaccination, for instance, so that you don't have to take time off to do all this, which might not take up much time anyway. We also have rest and refresh. At the end of the year, you have about like, depending on the number of days of public holidays, also we've got 7 to 11 days of break at the end of the day, where the entire firm closes for closes its doors physically anyway, but you still can reach us on our emails. They also have got flex space, which was pre-pandemic, but now on hindsight, it has helped set the stage for us to transition into working from home seamlessly. So in the past, we could work from our client side or the office, or from anywhere we wanted, using this flex space. And we have got this upskilling. This trainings, right? So Shweta mentioned just now microaggression, unconscious bias, stereotypes, and so these are again real life situations with which some people experience, and sometimes almost daily, where else people others who may perpetuate it, or may even like and they may do so unconsciously, or not intentionally. And how do we enable everyone to kind of like be aware of this, be aware of microaggressions, what they are, how does it happen, how can I, for instance, be aware so that I can take a step back, reflect upon it, and not continue doing it. So at PwC, one thing that we've been running is the unconscious bias workshop for our managers and senior managers for the past 2 years. And this is, I'm very proud to say, internally developed by the inclusion and diversity team at PwC. And we run this on our own. And where the benefits are is that, and where the key takeaways that our people mention is around the examples that are used and shared are real life examples of how unconscious bias have happened at critical junctures. And two key areas in which we discuss and have role plays and activities to kind of like bring you into the situation is recruitment and also promotion. So for recruitment, we have got this dummy CVs in which we ask people to kind of look at and then think about the biases that jump out at them. And then for promotions, we have got like statements like, for instance, not outspoken enough. And Shweta mentioned just now, around a statement that says you are very aggressive. But during these statements, we've asked people to think about, like, to go back to skills and have the ability to ask questions like, where is the skills gap in this case? That's just a statement, but how do you back that up? So what are the evidence around the lack of skills that you have observed for this person, so that then it is constructive for that person as well, if it's true. And then if it's not true, then we have an opportunity to discuss about a potential bias. And why managers and senior managers? Because we feel that they have had many years of experience. They are able to kind of take to not take it personally, and to kind of uh, take it as a lesson and then implement it at work. Another key point is that most of our interviewers are senior managers, and at a promotion level, most people at the staff review process are managers and above, so managers, senior managers, directors, and partners. So then we felt that this was a good way of, like, kind of bringing an awareness and putting it into practice all the concepts around stereotypes and judgments and judging people. So the other thing around, and you see this little badge there that says inclusive, it's not very clear, but it says inclusive mindset, and you've got a PwC logo. And this relates to the first point, inclusive mindset learning path. This is a 10-hour e-learn. And after these 10 hours that you do, you get this little badge that you can kind of showcase on LinkedIn to say that you are now you have an inclusive mindset. So I've taken this, and I must say personally have gained quite a bit, because it's such an immersive program, and it has introduced things like, of course, microaggression and intersectionality, and how does it kind of come in play at work. And there are specific segments for you to kind of have a discussion with people who've also completed the course on what are your insights and what are your reflection points, so that we can also learn from other people, even though it's an e-learn. So underlying all this, we have got programs to kind of like address unconscious biases, and also a long-running yearly diversity week, which I'll share in the next slide. Thank you. Wait, hold on. Let me just. There is another picture that should come up. Let me click on that. Yes. Okay. So we have got a couple of programs, and I'd like to talk through this a little bit more. Is that we have got one of the programs in which we want to kind of embed the culture of celebrating inclusion and diversity, and is what we call lepak with a stranger. And for international guests, lepak means hang out. So now, post pandemic, or during the pandemic, we haven't been able to have physical sessions. In the past, it's been physical, and we then call it lunch with a stranger. It's now developed to a virtual one called Lepak with a Stranger, or internally we call it LWAS. And how this came about was a staff. She's an expat. She kind of like in her want to experience Malaysia a little bit more, she started to have lunch every Thursday with someone whom she don't usually meet in her work circles. And we thought it was such a brilliant idea, and we stole the idea, and we kind of turned it up into like a lunch where people can kind of join to kind of understand about various topics. So it is at least 4 or 5 years running. It's every Thursday from April to November. So someone in the team, in my small little team, organizes it, and therefore we can be able to make it very consistent. And over the years, we've had like sessions where people share about their hobbies. They share about we have a parent section as well, so they can kind of share. We have got someone who's also shared about his dyslexia, and we have got like even non-profits coming in to share about the work that they do. But I think more importantly, what we have aimed to do is to kind of like feature people whom are different from ourselves, so that then we don't go back to thinking like, for instance, or the consulting people, they are like that, or the tax people, they are like that. It's to kind of like bring home the point that everyone has got something beyond just their work personas. The second bit is a human library. And there is a couple of videos that was made by PwC Malaysia. And if you go on to YouTube and you search Human Library PwC Malaysia, you can see a couple of videos. It's about this program. I would like to talk a bit more about that. And the reason why we have done this is that we have moved away from just one-off talks around diversity at work, because after a while then we thought like, oh no, it's beginning to sound the same, and people walk away from these ad hoc talks to just like back to business as usual, right? So we found that experiential programs to be a far better way to demonstrate for people, to kind of observe diversity and stereotypes and biases, and to kind of like provide a platform to reflect and then to talk about these questions. So we started with Human Library about 3 or 4 years ago, and we worked with the Social Impact Hub, who is based in Malaysia. And we kind of work with them because they own the brand Human Library. And what it is that they would invite books, which are essentially people with lived experiences, to kind of share in a small group their experiences, so that then this small group of people can read them like a book, and also ask questions whom they cannot ask anywhere else. For instance, let me give you an example. So this I am a book here, that picture, that man was is bipolar. And then what do you know about bipolar person, and how often do we have an opportunity to meet someone who is bipolar? So in this human library sharing, then we are able to kind of speak to him or her. They are able to kind of share about their experiences, and also answer questions to kind of like deal with the stereotypes and judgments. So over the years, we've got like people who are homeless, and who are former drug addicts and alcoholic, members of the LGBTQ community, and all walks of life. And people have been very appreciative of this, because then it allows them to kind of see beyond their circle of friends right now, or the same socio-economic bubble in which they live. So in a sense, not just Human Library, but Leap Up with a Stranger also offers you that kind of um, opportunity. We've got also now World Mental Health Day, which is also, I believe very strongly that it is of another form of diversity, because then this one you can't see, it's internal. For instance, if you have a broken leg, you have a physical injury, people can see, right? But then if you're struggling with mental health, you cannot see that, and there's so much stigma around it, and so much the lack of understanding. So we've been building awareness around mental health, and I think what the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, has the silver lining to it is that there is now more focus and attention, and more people understanding or beginning to kind of open their minds up to mental health or mental ill health. So okay, wait. So I won't play the video right now. So if you're more interested to find out more, you can catch up the video on YouTube. This slide is about what we do in the marketplace. So the lady there is Pauline Ho, and she's my boss. So she is and also the partner overseeing inclusion and diversity at PwC. And what we do through the 30% Club Malaysia is to kind of like oversee the mentoring scheme, where they would select mentors or from current board members to kind of provide mentorship to women who aspire to be on boards as well. So there have been many cohorts that have gone through. As you can see there, the last point, more than 60 women have gone through this 9-month mentoring program, and 30% are already on boards on listed and non-listed companies. So just playing a role in and helping more women gain leadership positions in in not just PwC but also in corporate Malaysia. And the next slide. Thank you. I think prompting for the next slide is much faster than me using the clicker. Okay, so we also wanted to kind of like share inclusion and diversity in the COVID-19 world. This was in the MIM's request as to what we should cover. So what changed during the COVID pandemic? Now that everyone's working from home, we found that there are different challenges for different demographics. Very often, we think of just the mothers who very rightfully are burnout. I super agree with you, Shweta. I'm a mom of two, and really feeling the brunt of it. Not just the mom, but throughout more so in the beginning. Actually, we have found that people who are single, who've moved from small towns, say like Ipoh, or a small town in Johor, and just renting a room, they felt it too, because they were in that small space in their room day and night. They couldn't leave their room. It was their place of work, their place of to relax, their place of sleep, and it was very difficult for them as well, and as well as people who had to care for ill family members or aged parents. So it's been very challenging for different set of demographics. And also what was challenging for us is that no matter what position you are in a firm, you had to kind of deal with the nuances of working from home. You know, even for leaders, how do you then manage a team, manage outcomes, right? The challenges will not go into that. Shweta has spoken a lot about it. But for us, how do we then reimagine work and well-being, and of course diversity, inclusion? So we had to again go back to the whole premise of how do we do flex space in the beginning. You know, we had to kind of like reinforce that trust is paramount, and then we have to kind of look at outcome focus, and everyone in the team must know that there will be deliverables at the end of the day. But it's okay for, say, parents to work at night, for instance, if they are helping with their kids at for school in the daytime, right? And then we had also trying to help all these different demographics manage burnout. And how do we do this? We had this thing called Block Your Clock to kind of help people manage time. We advocated for 45-minute meetings. We had this thing called Power Hour, so that then you have block time to do focus work and not just have like your calendar chock full of meetings the whole day, and the only time you have to do is kind of work at night. And then we had like promoted for teams who were able to do it, no lunch meetings, for instance, so that then you can just kind of take 1 hour away from a screen, right? We also had like virtual exercise classes, mindfulness classes. Mindfulness classes, you can see in the third column, you see 690% increase in mindfulness classes. So how this happened, and we can explain the math, is that in the pre-COVID, it used to be a physical mindfulness class, and this happened in the office. So people who were at the clients, for instance, or not in the office, it didn't seem very worthwhile for them to come back for just a 1 hour session, and therefore we had a much smaller group. Fast forward to during the pandemic, and even now, we see a lot of people signing up for our mindfulness classes, and the number is often like we see 50 to 70 signups, and 20%, 20 to 30% of dropout. So we see a huge need for that, and we kind of try to record the session so that people are also able to kind of access it again and again. We also have Be Well Together workshops for managers and above, so that then they kind of understand how to take care of themselves. And when they do that, they're able to kind of take care of their teams as well, and to notice the red flags on like mental health, and be able to know what to do, and then who to contact next. So some signposts as to like who are our EAP, means employee assistance program providers. So we have had an increase, 2 to 3 times of increase in the number of calls for our EAP. So I've also included a quote from a director who's attended the Be Well Together workshops, and it says that we should be mindful of the challenges that our teams may be facing, and be aware of their personal circumstances, because everyone's trying their best. They're trying to show up at work and trying their best, no matter what the challenges they are facing. And I wanted to also the last point on that slide is like COVID is one disruptor. The other one which will adversely affect women is climate change, which Shweta also had on her slide. And there are already research and studies to show that women are disproportionately affected by climate change, because there is already a wage gap, and it will be severely impacted by climate change. Okay, I have 2 more minutes left. Yes, the next slide was to kind of say a point on like, yes, all the programs may seem great and sound great, but we also are looking to kind of like improve our programs, and where we find that the biggest challenges are to try and what's next after awareness. How do you kind of like encourage people to retain that, and kind of practice it in their daily work? So after our conscious bias workshop, for instance, we've asked people to think about ways in which they can kind of like practice this into their daily work. And I remember one of the attendees saying that, okay, I will share this with my team, and I will ask my team to prompt me when I have I have demonstrated any of these biases. So that really stood out for that cohort, and something that we also encourage the next few cohorts to do as well. We also kind of look at providing firm-wide support and role models at leadership, so that it's not just the responsibility of the inclusion and diversity team to drive this. It has got to be everyone in the firm. The other thing was around reducing stigma. This is an ongoing thing, and especially for mental health. So we are that's just 77% believe that PwC is an inclusive work environment. That's from a global people survey. It's good but not great. We have still room to grow. I have a few seconds left. I think I'll pause here. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you so much, Florence. That was really very informative, and I think just to see what PwC has done in terms of targets, policies, upskilling of folks. It's quite holistic in the way that you all have done the ecosystem of working this agenda through, and love the examples on Lepak with a stranger, human library, board member mentors. I think you're going to get a lot of people who are going to steal those ideas as well. I think it's lovely. Yeah. Thank you so much. We're now going into our question and Q&A session. I've got a couple of questions that come from the floor itself. So I'm going to start with that. This goes to either of you. I mean, whichever you feel comfortable with. So we have Sari Haida, who has actually asked, how do you stay motivated as a female leader? Shweta, do you want to come off mute? Yeah. So while we are waiting for Shweta, Florence, would you like to take that?
Yeah, sure. So how to stay motivated, right? It's around looking back at your purpose. I think after a while, you kind of look beyond just how much you're paid, for instance, or what are the benefits that the firm will offer you, to looking at how much you can impact. So, whether it's seeing someone grow in your team, or mentoring someone at work, and seeing them grow, or volunteering at work, and seeing that your what you do actually impacts, and kind of like raises the potential of another individual or an organization. I think that also gives me a lot of fulfillment. Uh, and to be frank, there are the highs and the lows. And what I feel brings me through the lows have been always around, what do how do I then help people, or how do I then look at creating change through the programs that we run. And especially well-being has been both a challenge and also a source of satisfaction and fulfillment. Yeah.
Thanks, Florence. Shweta, if you have got your audio on, I'd like
Can
to
you hear me
skew
now?
the question a little bit. Does it matter to see yourself as a female leader or just as a professional individual and keeping yourself motivated?
Can you hear me, Sukanti?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. That's an interesting dichotomy, isn't it? Just a professional and a female leader. No, I do think of myself as a female leader because that's who I am. Not acknowledging my gender is a huge problem. Pretending that it doesn't matter is not true. I am a woman, and so I have to bring that all of me to the workplace. So I think of myself as a female leader. There are advantages I have, like Florence. By the way, brilliant presentation, Florence. I was thinking, why am I not working for PwC? Brilliant presentation, such amazing work. Like Florence, I am a working mother, Suganti. And that is a reality of my journey and my aspirations. I have had to plan that, bake that into my journey and my plan. So I cannot create a gender agnostic. I cannot pretend it doesn't matter. It matters, and I have to work with it.
Appreciate that input and feedback from both of you. I'm going to move on to Kohila's question, and this it comes with this: what will be your advice for women who have multiple commitments and yet she wants to achieve her dream to be a successful businesswoman? I think every one of us have sort of kind of been there, done that a bit. So over to you.
Go ahead, Florence, and
Shweta,
then
you
I'll
want to
take
go
it.
first? Oh, okay,
You
cool.
want me to? Yeah, go ahead, Florence, and then I'll take it.
Okay. So this question, it brings to mind an advice which my ex-boss and someone I really look up to shared with me. And this was at a time when I had my my first baby, which was 10 years ago. And what she said really, really stuck with me. And what she gave me an analogy. And she said that life is like a road somewhere, like a highway. And sometimes when the circumstances are right, you can press on the pedal on the accelerator, you can go fast. You can go fast. But there are some times when and it's perfectly okay to ease up on the accelerator or even make a pit stop during some parts of your life. For instance, it might be a major life event, or something like you've just become a new parent and you have to kind of juggle the new role and to learn the ropes. And it's perfectly okay to kind of like ease back on the pedal a little bit, uh, get some understanding, and then later on, if time is right, you can then press again on the accelerator and then go fast. For instance, you don't necessarily need to keep the same speed all the time, and something will give, something will burn out. Whether it's your mental health, your well-being, or something, or even relationships. So in yes, you can have everything, but over time, it's not a sprint. We have only 24 hours a day, so it's very important to see what matters at that moment in time, address that, and then see what comes up next. For instance, if there is you need to see to your child, it's a medical emergency, get that over and done with. Work will still be there later, and you can attend to that later.
Thanks, Florence. And I think my 2 cents to that would be that, as we, hit on the brakes or we accelerate, I think accelerate is not too much an issue. When you hit on the brakes, you really have to have a clear mindset that you're not a victim. You're conscious about the decision of hitting the brake, the consequences that come with it, and then move ahead with it. So that would be my 2 cents to add to your response. Now, Shweta, we have a question that has come to you. What are the best remedies to address burnout and bounce back into action within a given short time frame?
Okay. So I think, first of all, let me go back and say that, this desire for great output, we are a very output driven world. We must think of outcomes. And like Florence said, life is a marathon, it's not a 100-meter sprint. So, first of all, if there is a sense of burnt out, and it will happen because women are held to higher level of standards and accountable for many, many things. For example, if the child is not doing well, generally the person will say, what is the mother doing? It just always, why is the mother not here at the parent teachers meeting? I bet most of you that if you have kids who are school going age and there are WhatsApp groups, it is the mother who's on the WhatsApp group. And she's the one who's generally responding and doing all the coordination. So it's just a lot. And end of the day, it's a 1.5 kg organ that we all have. So first of all, don't be in a hurry to come back. Recognize signs of distress. I am fully with Florence as she talks about the importance of mental health. To all of you out there, the biggest killer, by the way, in the next decade is not going to be diabetes and cancer, it's depression. And it comes when the chemicals in your brain are like in a crazy cocktail because you're not giving yourself time. So first of all, don't be in a hurry to come. If you're feeling burnt out, it is okay to take some time off. And I know there might be economic needs. Like you can't, for example, give up your job. Move to a part-time role. Move to the longer time, it's like putting money in a mutual fund, SIP. The longer term impact of taking time off when you're feeling burnt out is much higher than many of us think. Just power through. It's okay. By just working hard, I will go through this. It's not a good idea. What can you do? I have 2 things I want to share with you. One, do something different. So look at your day, and the most practical advice I have is, if you look at your calendar will tell you what you do. It has things like pick up the kids, take whatever meetings, this, that, dinner, prepare dinner, do shopping, etc. try to introduce at least one thing in your calendar which is not what you have been doing. It could be anything: gardening, walking, it could be dancing, listening to music, watching Netflix. I don't know what it is, but one thing that you're not doing. Your brain needs a break, and that break has to come from something different. The other one I want to tell you, and again, Florence talked so much about it. I was like applauding her all the way as she was speaking. It is very critical to make time for yourself. So even if you're working, and I can say this because I work in a company, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm doing another master's, I have two children, I have a dog. I mean, if you take an hour and a half off, and you might think, oh my God, my kid is going to come now and I have to do this. That 1.5 hour of taking time is like wealth building. Whether it is exercise, you want to do yoga, or you want to do meditation, or you want to go in the garden, take and you can't, which is why if you have already come to burnt out, then it's more like a surgical intervention. But you can prevent it. It's not that you can keep working 18-hour days and say, okay, when I burn out, I'm going to go into a intervention mode. No, it will keep coming back. Let's also, Sugandhi, since we're talking about this, I just want to add, the very act of living today is an incredibly stressful life. Think about our parents, right? Most of us had parents with a single job. Our fathers or mothers usually worked in one company. Our phones did not get updated every 6 months. We were not worried that water will probably run out. We were not worried about wars. We were not worried about cyber attacks. We were not worried about our world as children and as adults, young adults, was very different than the. Look at the children who are born during pandemic times or went to school during pandemic times. I have a very cute video I saw about this kids who are born during pandemic time, and they're obsessed with sanitizers. Those kids can't stop using sanitizers, and it looks like a cute video, but can you imagine the anxiety that they are already growing up with, because they're always rubbing their hands with imagined sanitizers. I saw this very very interesting video. So go easy on yourself. Go easy on yourself. Don't be focused on output, be focused on outcome.
I love your feedback on that question, Shweta, and I think it sounds almost rudimentary to say go slow and give yourself a break, but I think it's understated, and we really need to take a conscious effort to do that for to continue our maintaining our well-being, actually, really. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to move on to Florence. Florence, there's a question from Farah to you. What seems to be the future trend for inclusion in Malaysia? What is it with the political and religious sensitivity? And it appears to be an increase in brain drain as well. How do you see other countries handle this?
So I will not comment on the political, and then to kind of like talk around what else needs to be done in Malaysia, and people who make a decision to stay. So I think that there still needs to be a lot of work done, even in the gender space alone. And you think about going back to what we mentioned around leaking pipeline, we have more women in university, and you look at I quickly looked up the statistics just now. We have 2 times more women in universities compared to men, and we end up at having only 25% at board level at this point in time, and that points out that not only is there a leaking pipeline, but it's also a smaller pool of talent who end up at leadership. So whether it's political or whether it's in corporate Malaysia, it's the same. So how do we then help women from when after they graduate stay at the workplace? And I think it's such a systemic and also a cultural thing that we have to address. Shweta, just now you mentioned the WhatsApp groups, right? It's almost always a mom, and I have many of those, right? And it's the same. Like, for instance, if a child falls sick, who is the default parent who goes and brings the child to see the doctor? Or even in lessons in school right now, and I see in my daughter's my children's school books, it says that the father is the doctor working in an office and the mother is in the kitchen cooking dinner. Like, this, it's in our lessons, it's in our families, it's the way we all function as individuals in families and in our culture. And I think that all of us will need to kind of like play a role to kind of change the perspectives and the discussions that we have at home. Like, then how do we then, for instance, between my husband and I, have a role model that uh, equality in terms of looking at the household chores, for instance. It starts right at home, and even beyond just looking at how to increase board memberships for women in the corporate world. So, Farah, there's really no easy answer, and I feel that for no matter where you are, to kind of like look at how we can then change the discussion or the perspective or view of how we see gender roles. So even if it's a movie that you watch or an advertisement, then if it's around like women, it's a soap advertisement, for instance. Is it the women who's washing the plates, right? Have a conversation with your children, like, okay, so men can do the dishes as well, right? So I think it starts with every one of us, uh, where we are right now, where we are working and in our families.
Yeah. Thanks, Florence. And actually, I think if I add a 2 cents to that, it would be that it's many folds. I mean, you can't do this at an or just an organizational level or a leadership level or a country. You all of us have to put this many prongs to this, and then work at a concerted effort towards overcoming such challenges. Now I'm going to move on to bring up the poll, Shweta, because we did run a poll. And so for the first question, which is, do you have any formal programs in your organizations to help women develop their leadership potential? Believe it or not, 75% said no. And just some thoughts from both of you, starting with you, Shweta, on does that surprise you? I mean, or it's status quo? You think that's what's happening right now?
Yes.
What's your feel?
So if 75% people have said no, then I'm assuming 25% would have said yes, which is good. And I'm not surprised. In fact, I would like to put it out there that a lot of companies believe that I don't need a separate program for women. Women themselves come and ask, why do I need to be in a separate program for women leaders? Am I just because I'm a different woman? But we now have conclusive research coming out of Harvard, INSEAD, that leadership is about identity work, and gender is a big impact on identity. And so doing it in women only groups creates a safe space. So to give you a very simple example, right? If I am talking about women and leadership development at the mid management level, a lot of things comes around guilt and shame. Guilt that I'm not being a good enough mother. Shame that I believe that I am underperforming at my work because I'm also spending time here. Most mixed groups don't talk about guilt and shame because that's not something a lot of men experience, right? So when you bring that out in cohorts with women, that becomes very important. And I could just go on and on. So yes, I'm not surprised, but I can say this, that the companies who are not doing anything, let me tell you, we now have research that shows that if you look at research from INSEAD, from CCL, from McKinsey, in fact, the McKinsey report talks about, HBR had an article very recently that when you do have programs specific for women, you're doing two things. One, you're developing them, but you're also putting it out there in the world that I am an inclusive employer. So potential employees also find it very attractive that you actually believe in doing. It's not just about talking, right? Florence showed that, right? PwC is an inclusive employer because look at the amount of effort they're doing. They're talking about mental health. How many companies I would want to know even talk about these things, right? So you have to put your talk where your, put your money where your talk is, basically.
Would you also say that, if companies that are having this kind of leadership program tailored for women actually then harness the innate abilities of women into their organizations? They bring it, they actually enable this through this kind of specific leadership programs. Would you say that?
Absolutely, Sugandhi. In fact, I'll give you data. I'm working with many companies, but data from one large Indian conglomerate. It's an Indian multinational company. Okay, so they have a large presence in Africa, in Asia, some parts in US, etc. And I've been working with them for almost 9 months now. The women whose teams that we are working with, the retention has actually gone up. Top talent retention in their teams have gone up. And retention of top talent is not gender specific, right? So it's top talent, it's top talent. But these women have been able to bring the learnings back, and we are not teaching them about business acumen or how do you retain. We're just teaching them how to get back in touch with who you are as a leader and what is your authentic style of leadership. What is your identity? If you could change one thing about the world, what would that be? And that's making a phenomenal impact. And so organization, now this company is saying, I want to make it an annual thing. Every year they want to take a cohort of their brightest women and put them past this program. So absolutely, Sugandhi, it's a business imperative.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go on to the next poll question, which is: do you have a formal coaching stroke mentoring program for the top women talent in your organization? And we had 10% that said yes and 90% that said no. And any thoughts, Florence, on seeing that poll results?
Well, I guess it's reflective of the first question, right? And they are interlinked. And if you don't have a program, and then this is also, it falls within the same kind of parameters, you would have one if you had the other. And I was just reflecting while Shweta was talking, and your last point around business imperative, I was going like, oh my gosh, that was, I fully agree with that, because why would like businesses and leaders have why would they want to run something? And I feel that when you are trying to put out a proposal to the leaders on trying to have a diversity program, very often we try and think about like, okay, what is a problem that the leaders have that we can help solve? Can we position this as like something that we are trying to help them build a business, build more market share, more clients? How can we help them do that by running this, for instance? Yeah, so this is one thing in which we try and like kind of bring this back from the fluffy bit of it all to like really how do we then help them solve their problem, and then with that then it's got a fighting chance of it being implemented.
Absolutely. So actually, I'd like to go back to what Shweta had in the presentation, which she alluded to, economy, right? Your consumer base is reflective of the women that are out there, doing all the purchasing. It makes absolute business sense for you to have diversity in the organization, but that's going to reflect on what kind of consumer behaviors are out there, and you actually gain from that on from a business front. So thanks for that. We're going to move
Sugandhi,
on
can I
to
just
the
add
next.
one thing?
Yes,
Sugandhi, I just want
please.
to add one thing. I want to add one example, which I used to work for Motorola many years ago. And if you remember, Motorola is a company that first made the cell phone. And
Yes.
there was a phone called as a Moto Razor, which came out. Somebody in Motorola had the idea of making it pink and giving it to Paris Hilton, who she was a page 3 celebrity. And the entire market of phone as an accessory opened up. Till then, phone was a utility gadget, but Paris Hilton turned it into a fashion accessory. And nobody said, oh, you're being charitable, because it's a market
Indeed.
imperative. In India, you have, Diwali branded cards, credit cards, completely aimed at women, because women shop a lot during Diwali in India. They shop a lot. And so exactly, you're addressing it's a market. You're doing something to address a specific market. Why would we not do that for talent? That's the question.
Absolutely. And I'm so now, since we're having this, really nice conversation, I'm going to move on to a session called rapid fire. Okay, it doesn't have to be as rapid as, but because I do want to pick your minds, I do want you all to, elaborate as much as you possibly could. There's going to be two sections. We have got 5 questions on both sections. One being your personal experience, and the other, just general questions. Yeah. So first one goes out to Florence. Who inspired you to be a leader and why?
Well, this is a tough one, and put me in a spot to kind of name someone, right? And then like at the risk of leaving someone out, I'd just like to say uh both my ex and current boss. Sui Feng used to be my boss, and she used to be a partner at PwC, and she's this drive, a force of nature, and she doesn't kind of like allow you to kind of uh, take a see yourself in a negative light. She's always very pushing you forward and trying to expand your comfort zone. And she was like the key person who um, challenged me to be on panels and take up speaking roles. And I am such an introvert. I'd rather not do this, but I think because she pushed me to do it, and now I do this very often, and I can see why it's benefited me. And I kind of try and do the same for the team. And the other one is my current boss. Her name's Pauline, and she is this amazing woman who does so many things and try and she knows so many things, and it's inspired me to kind of like, yeah, I can do beyond just my current role. I can take on new roles and learn from them. And they have been both very influential in my career.
Well, if you do keep in touch with Swet Fong, thank her for us, because hence you're here today with us and speaking. Anyway, I'm going to move on to Shweta. Shweta, the same question to you. Who inspired you to be a leader and why?
Actually, I would say it is the women ancestors that I have, my mom, my grandmother, because they did not have access to education and opportunities that I did. And yet they gave me the choice to dream, the freedom to study. So to give somebody a legacy that you don't have access to is really big. And they did that with me. So they inspired me to be a leader.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going on to the next question, going back to Florence. Florence, what has been the most significant barrier in your career?
Um, this one is tough. Barrier. I would like to say imposter syndrome, because so very often I kind of second guess myself and not put myself out there as much as I could have, because I kind of question like, am I ready for this? Am I good enough? Am I good enough to share? Am I good enough to? Is my even my point of view good enough for to be heard by someone? Do I add value? And I feel that perhaps men don't have this at all. They don't question themselves, and women always kind of like hold themselves to and Shweta, you mentioned this just now as well, to higher standards than anyone else, right? So I guess this would be the most significant barrier.
Actually, to add to that, right, there's this survey done by Boston Consulting that actually say when a promotion or that comes across to a man or a male or a female, right, the male with 50% strengths for the job would say yes immediately and take it on, but a woman with maybe even up to 60%, 80, 70% would still feel that she doesn't have the 30%, she might not go after it. So really, I resonate to what you just said, and I've seen this in action as well in life, right? So Shweta, moving on to you, the same question to you. What has been the most significant barrier in your career?
Very similar to what Florence said. I said, I did not own my steel. In fact, that is the tagline of Invincible Woman: own your steel. And the idea of the program came because I realized in 23 years of my career, I have access to strength, flexibility, intelligence that I did not own within myself. I diminished it. And I kind of, like Florence, second guess myself or said, oh, I'm not ready yet, or let someone else take center stage. But when I did own my steel, and I said, of course, Invincible Woman happened. I had another startup. Um, so I think that was the biggest, the things in my own hand. Of course, it was put there by society, by conditioning and all of that. But in the end, it was me that came in the way of my own career.
I can understand that totally. Yeah. And actually, with the earlier response from Florence, she sort of alluded to this question that we're going to ask you, but have you did say that you had this imposter syndrome that comes up, right? But how do you navigate your way through it? What do you do to sort of move away from that?
Uh, just like Nike said, the Nike tagline, just
Just
do
do
it.
it, right?
Yeah. So so my major I used to have this big stage fright kind of thing. And because of the pressure that I had from Suifang to just do it, I would then uh agree to do a speaking engagement or role or moderate or a moderator, and I'll just follow through with it, prep as much as possible, and I use my anxiety to kind of like power me through all the prep and make sure that I've got everything covered. I prep for it. I prep for plan A, plan B, plan C kind of questions, and then just do it. And I find over time, I kind of like ease into the role. So I guess just do it and fake it till you make it.
I can resonate to that, and nothing like the real life experience, right? Only when you do it do you get past whatever fears you have. So, okay, I'm going to ask a similar question to Shweta. Shweta, what about you? How do you navigate through imposter syndrome?
So I have found, the anxiety that I'm not good enough, whenever I encounter it in myself, I actually use another anxiety to kick this anxiety out. So I then think of what would I do if I don't achieve my potential? How would I feel that at the end of my life? Or what could I tell my daughter? I have a son and a daughter, that I didn't do enough to make my life, to live the best possible life or do the best possible work I could. When I think that, then, these anxieties feel very small. So I use that to prop myself up.
That is an absolutely great idea. That's really lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so
Yeah.
moving on. Have you ever, and this is going to Florence, have you ever been so discouraged you wanted to quit?
Yeah, definitely. Every time I come to like a situation that I just feel so stressed, or it's mostly stress actually. But I kind of take this frame of mind to know that all things are not permanent. That there will be an end to something. You will see the light at the end of the tunnel eventually. And I've seen through a lot of challenging times, and I know that I will get through it. So this kind of self belief that nothing's permanent, and if I hack away at a problem long enough, that we will then see a way out.
I love that. Thank you so much for being so transparent and sharing that with us. Shweta, yourself, what about you?
Oh, absolutely, Sugandhi. The number of hours I've spent in the bathroom bawling my heart out and crying is not even funny. I have come out of, bathrooms with a red nose and into meetings, and everybody kind of, looking like Rudolph the reindeer. Uh, yes, there are days when I've felt that I can't take it anymore. And like Florence said, a lot of had to do with stress. And my coach once told me this amazing thing, and he's somebody I really look up to. He said, the way to eat an elephant is one spoonful at a time. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, don't think about the mountain, don't think about the full elephant. Just focus on today. Just focus on, like, right now, I have to get through this meeting. Don't think about anything else. And that advice really helped me. So there are days when I feel overwhelmed, even today. And then I just think of, okay, these are the three things I'll finish today, and that's it.
Wise
So you have
words,
to take a
wise
long term, and yes, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. So we've got the next question. So, Florence, what would your advice be to your 25-year-old self?
Okay, so this is a tough one. I mean, Well, I guess is that not to give up before you actually experience, or give something a chance. Don't give up before you even try to do something. Just try it out first and then make up your mind after that. Yeah, and know that things will work out in the end.
Nice one. And yourself, Shweta?
I think I would say, you know, honor yourself before you think of honoring anybody else. Pay attention to yourself. Give yourself more credit. That's what
That's
I would say.
really tough. I think women struggle with that so much, right? And you rightfully pointed it out. Okay, in the interest of time, I probably may not be able to go through all the questions. I'm going to do maybe one or two more before we end the session. Let me ask you: how can women navigate through power structures? Florence?
Yeah. I think going back to what I shared earlier around like seeing an individual, for instance, and what he or she as needs, whether it's help to solve a problem or whether it's something that you can kind of help, so that then you're seen as like kind of not a threat, but you are seen as an ally, right? So I think that's where we, or kind of how to kind of see where you can kind of work towards a shared objective, so that you're in the same boat, you're in the same team here, right? And the objective is not to kind of go into
Common goals.
conflict, but then see whether you can work towards the same direction.
Thank you for that, Florence. What about you, Shweta?
Absolutely. I think finding allies is something, building alliances, what Florence already talked about. The second thing I think women don't do enough, and we now know because there's research, is we're not conscious of the sources of power. There are referent power, there is expertise power, there is positional power, there is power coming from many different sources. Being aware of and working very strategically with these different sources of power will help. And women need to understand that, women, men, everybody, but we know study after study shows that women just don't like to think about it like that. They just like to think that I just should put my head down, do a lot of good work, and if I do a lot of good work, I get recognized. Well, it doesn't work like that. Let me put it out there. It doesn't. You need alliances, you need sponsors, and you need powerful people to speak up for you.
And you need to do that networking in the organization is
Absolutely,
absolutely
absolutely.
crucial to build those relationships, sponsors to keep you in their minds when things open up for a
When a role comes up.
vacancy, when a
Correct.
project comes through. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. We'll do one last question and then we'll wrap up. Yeah. How important is it to have a mentor to grow as a leader, and does the gender matter? And this goes out to either one of you.
Shweta, you do want to share?
Sure. Yes, very important. And no, gender does not matter. In mentoring is a very selfless relationship between a mentor and mentee. If you're lucky to find somebody who's interested in your career and is willing to give back, I mean, I always say God has no gender. So a mentor is actually a God, a guru, a teacher, and it doesn't matter. So get a mentor. It doesn't matter whether it's a man or woman, somebody who's interested and is willing to help you. That's all you need.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to have to conclude our conversation that we've had. I'd like to thank both of you for being absolutely fabulous. The participants for actually participating and providing questions. I would like to request those of you who are still on the call to go into the chat box and see if you see a link there. Please do give us feedback on this session. I would like to remind you that we have yet another webinar on the 23rd of November. It's focusing on building an inclusive digital economy. Please register. The link is also on the chat box. And as we approach 2022, we've lined up yet another series of really attractive webinars that we'll be putting out there. If you do wish to be a sponsor or a supporting partner, do get in touch with us at events@mim.org.my. Last but not least, I'd like to thank our partner, our sponsor, Conrad Adner Stiftung, for sponsoring this MIM Crucial Conversations. And the recordings of today's session will be emailed to you. So thank you very much. I wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you again.
It's a pleasure to be with both of you today. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I really
Thank you.
enjoyed the conversation.